Hi, Nan Jensen here. This is video number 5, and the topic is the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumers' Rights. Before I get started, I have to do my disclaimer again. These videos contain information. They do not contain legal advice. If you need legal advice, you need to speak to a lawyer, you need to tell them your whole situation, and you need to get a letter of engagement from them. So you must not rely on anything you hear in these videos. If you need legal advice, speak to a lawyer. So let's get on to today's topic, which is the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumers' Rights. So I just want to go back to the last couple of videos and remind you that we talked about the concept of capacity, and that capacity was about having the understanding the nature and consequences of your decisions. Now, in the medical world, they use a concept called competence to make an informed choice and give informed consent. It's similar to capacity. It's not exactly the same, but they're often used interchangeably. And so when we're talking about the code uses that language of competence, but it's fairly interchangeable in this particular context. Now, if you're not familiar with the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumers' Rights, so I'll just call it the code because it's a lot of words and I have to keep checking because I always forget one or two of them. If you're not familiar with the code, I really suggest that you have a look at it. It's called the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumers' Rights. So we may not all be consumers of disability services, but we're certainly all consumers of health services. So it applies to all of us, not just to our disabled family members. So it's important to know what's in the code, because if we don't know what our rights are, we won't know if they're being violated. There's a lot of really important things in the code, and I don't have a copy with me, otherwise I'd show it to you. But there's rights such as the right to be treated respectfully, the right to complain, the right to services of an appropriate standard. That's right 4. That's the one that attracts the most complaints to the Health and Disability Commissioner, where people feel that they weren't given an appropriate level of service. So an operation went wrong, or some treatment maybe hurt them. So it's quite important to know what's in the document. You can find copies of it online. It's usually hanging up in your doctor's office or the offices of other providers. And there are different versions of it. So some versions are very detailed and other versions give more of a summary. So I want to talk in particular about the example we used in previous videos. So the example was about a young person who, as a child, as an under 18, the parents were the guardians and they were able to sign any consent forms, or give consent to treatment. But then once the person becomes an adult, if they lack capacity, then the parents can no longer sign because they're not guardians anymore. And if the person lacks capacity and the doctor believes that they don't understand enough about the risks of the treatment and of what the treatment is about, then the doctor may refuse to give the treatment, or whoever the provider is may refuse to give the treatment. And then there's nobody who has the authority to give consent if there's no welfare guardian and the young person hasn't given power of attorney. So in this code, there is actually under Right 7, it's called Right 7.4, there is a provision that allows the doctor, from our example, to do the operation without getting accused of assault. And it also can give family members the ability to be involved in the decision making despite not having any legal authority. So I'm going to discuss that a little bit more. And before I do, I just want to talk about the fact that under this code and under the Health and Disability Commissioner, there are many different professions that are covered. So we've talked about doctors, but there are many professions. And again, if you look at the Health and Disability Commissioner website, you can see all the different professions. So it includes midwives, nurses, dentists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, beauty, what do you call them? Beauty therapists, physiotherapists, many different professions, more than you can imagine. And in addition, recently it appears that the Ministry of Education is considered a disability service provider if they are providing special education, or what they now call learning support. So it may be that even complaints about services of special education can be made to the Health and Disability Commissioner. You're not going to get money. Most of these decisions are on a very low level, so they try to get people to reconcile, to do some sort of mediation, to agree on a solution, maybe just an apology, or the provider will look at their practice and do things differently. If something is really serious, and you would hope that wouldn't happen to, I hope that wouldn't happen to anybody listening to this video, that then it can go to the Human Rights Review Tribunal, and small amounts of money can be given out, but that's really in very serious situations that we wouldn't really want to have happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you Rights 7.4, and since I haven't yet figured out how to put slides on, I'm going to do this, but when I do figure out how to put a slide on, then I'll edit that in, and hopefully you can see this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it down again so I can look at it, is I'm going to translate it from the medical language that's in there and the hypothetical language into the words that we use in the law. So basically what Rights 7.4 says is, it says when a person when the subject person lacks capacity and there's no one entitled to consent on their behalf, so that means there's no power of attorney, there's no welfare guardian, then the provider, which in this case, in the example, is the doctor, can go ahead and do the operation if it's in the best interests of the subject person, and they've taken reasonable steps to find out what that person's views are. Even if they don't believe that person understands it all, they need to have taken reasonable steps to find out what that person's views are. And then either they've found out their views, or if they haven't found out their views, it says that they should take into account the views of other suitable persons who are interested in the welfare of the consumer and available to advise the provider. So in other words, you, family members. So I'll put that up here. So down there in bold, you'll see it says other suitable persons who are interested in the welfare of the consumer. That means the welfare of the subject person, and are available to advise the doctor. So what that does is it allows the doctor to do the operation without actually having somebody with legal authority to give the consent. It also helps family members be involved in the decision making, even though they don't have any legal authority. So it's important to know about this. It's a good idea to have a copy of it. You can use it to try to get involved if the medical professional or whoever it is trying to say to you, we can't give you this information, you can't be involved because you don't have any legal authority. You can use that. I can't guarantee that it's going to work all the time. I have run into situations where doctors and hospitals have simply refused to use Right 7.4 or to acknowledge it, and have insisted that some sort of legal process put in place, such as the appointment of a welfare guardian or an order under the PPPR Act. But it's worth a go. So that's about all I'm going to say about that. And thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video, which is video number 6, and that's about property managers and property administrators.